Hello, my name is Hyunjung Kim. The presentation is about how to manage your writing. The managing means doing or dealing with something difficult at a particular time. Through this talk, I would like to show how you to deal with the writing in a given time, which is by you. Research writing such as PhD dissertation is a daunting task. For my case, the hard part was not only with the writing, but also with the research process. And research process was much harder than I have expected, and I hear similar stories from my friends who received their PhD degrees ahead of me. Writing is a process that conveys your thinking to other people. Of course, there are other ways to convey your thinkings, such as presentations, discussions, lectures, and so on. However, the point of writing is that it is like a construction process that eventually builds up to a great building. If I keep using the analogy, presentations and lectures are similar to creating small rooms and facilities inside your building, but only with writing, you can organize them into a huge building. In here, I intend to lay out my lessons learned while I was writing my PhD dissertation. To be honest, I'm not the best writer and English is my second language. But I write every day at NASA. It includes journal articles, project report, proposal for funding, recommendation letter, invention disclosure, patent, and email. And I use my lessons learned from my dissertation writing, everyday writing at work at NASA. People simply think that research is an intention of a study to a higher level. If you keep working hard, then you will eventually reach the goal, but that is not. Research has a number of aspects different from study or typical running process. First of all, direction of your work is very important in research. If you have passed your comprehensive exam, you already sensed it since the exam is primarily about whether your work is heading into the right direction or not. That is why your committee members spend a long time discussing your research question before an exam. Since those questions shape the direction of your research work. In analogy, planning your research is similar to a case of traveler planning on a long trip. You may want to go to New York City, or you may want to visit Chicago or Los Angeles, and so on. Suppose you decide to go to New York City. Then what kinds of things do you need to prepare for travel? First, you need to consider your current location. The direction to New York City differs depending on your current location. For me, I live in Yorktown, Virginia, then I need to travel northeast to the New York City. Suppose you are in the State College in Pennsylvania, then you need to travel to east to heading to the New York City. What about London in UK? The direction now becomes west. Your comprehensive exam is primarily for checking whether your direction is correct or not. The number of people make mistake of saying, I need to go to west, while they are in Washington, D.C. Some people are too ambitious. Then they make a mistake of announcing, I want to go to Atlantis, which is almost non-existent. Remember, this game is totally different from study. When you study, you do not need to worry about whether the study material in front of you might be totally useless. However, for research, this direction is very important because you might waste years and years when your research is directed toward into wrong directions. Therefore, even if you passed the written comprehensive exam long time ago, you need to double check if your research direction is correct, and you need to present a justification in your research. This is very important. Nobody wants to work hard for years later to find that those efforts were useless. It was a long time ago, but I still remember the moment it was the first time I attended the academic conference during my master program, and a lady approached me for a chat. We exchanged some greeting, and suddenly she asked me, "Hey, what's your research question?" I continued to talk about my research work, but strangely her responses did not feel very positive. Did you notice this here? The research question is the number one method that researchers use to communicate with each other, even without any common background or prior knowledge on their research topics. The same can be applied to writing your technical paper like a dissertation. Your research question needs to be narrowed down as a workable level research question, and your research question showed what kinds of direction you are heading into. It conveys the directional information to other researchers. You should remember this. Your research question can be changing as time goes on. The big theme will remain mostly the same, but you will have several sub-questions from the big theme questions. As your research advances, you will update your research question based on your finding and learning. And this update process showed how well your research journey progressed. And it will finally form a storyline for your writing in terms of directions that you took at important milestones. The decisions that you took at the milestones must make sense for readers of your writing. Again, the final destination does not have much importance as to your storyline has. Having a fancy conclusion for your writing will be wonderful, but you should be able to reasonably explain how you came to it, whether your results are fancy or not. And that is the capability required for a good technical writing researcher. Here is an everyday example of a research case. You might think a research process is complicated and difficult to run, but interestingly, most people are good at research in their daily life. The problem lies with the formulation. You need to explicitly lay out research steps, and that's it. I want to show you one example from my own experience fixing my old 98 Altima with 200k miles on. One day I noticed that my car is having a problem. I was cruising on a highway at a speed of 65-70 miles per hour. When I was climbing uphill, the engine started to sputter a little and lose power momentarily. The tachometer showed a drop about 100 to 200 RPM, and then it quickly recovered to the normal level. When the uphill became flat or downhill, the problem went away. Obviously, I had a problem with the engine combustion, but how can I solve this problem? Here, you need a research process. Based on the symptom and problem, engine hesitation climbing uphill, we initiate research process. The process of converting gasoline into motion is called internal combustion. The combustion engines use small controlled explosions to generate the power needed to move your car or the place it needs to go. As a next research process, you formulate the question. What do you need for the combustion? That is the next level of question. The combustion needs a fuel, air, and ignition from electricity. By developing research process, we continue formulating research question. Let's formulate the research question from high level to narrow down level. The high level question is that what's wrong with the engine power loss? Then refine your research question with which means more narrow down on the combustion-based theory. Combustion needs three elements: fuel, air, and fire, which is ignition. These questions covered for some engine problem to some temporary engine combustion problem. Now hinge your research questions to connect the sudden RPM drop climbing I-99 uphill and the combustion, the process of converting gasoline into motion, need fuel, air, and fire. We need the data correction here. A data I correct is that when the fuel tank is full, the symptom gone. It returns when the less than quarter remains. Relate to the air, no difference observed. Temperature either cold day or warm day, and moisture either raining or sunny day, no differences. Relate to the ignition, no difference observed in electricity supply, no headlight dashboard light brightness changed, and radio CD player function is normal. From the data I collected, the air and ignition parts can be eliminated. Therefore, a potential answer for what's wrong with your engine power loss is fuel, based on the previous research question. Based on the collected data and observation, the research question can be updated. Next updated and narrowed down research question would be, what kind of a combustion problem with fuel does the engine have? Because it is related to the amount of fuel in a tank. The fuel originates from tank, travel along inside pipe, and finally reach the engine cylinder. Therefore, the fuel deficiency would be related to these things. To find an answer for the further refined question, fuel deficiency, now we need the literature review. As I'm not the expert on the car and or vehicle fuel system, I check the vehicle operation manual. For the literature review, I find the car fuel system contains, from the literature review, I find the car fuel system contains fuel tank, pump, line, filter, and injection system. Now the next research question, of course, further narrow down question would be which part can cause intermittent lack of fuel supply. Need to go over all these tank, pump, line, filter, and injection system possibilities, but I eliminated the fuel. I eliminated fuel tank and fuel line by checking any leak of them. Based on the symptom and my record of vehicle maintenance, I suspect the fuel filter. The system presents only when less than quarter of fuel remains and the fuel filter has not been replaced for several years. Now, what's the next step? Yes, refine the question. Next, narrow down research question is, does clock in fuel filter cause the intermittence lack of fuel supply? The next narrow down research question sounds like a hypothesis. Let's test the hypothesis. Then how? Idea is something is blocking, then what can block the fuel and lower the pressure? Going back to manual, fuel pressure is created by fuel pump. Other blocking element to the combustion chamber, you can bring another question. There are fuel filter and injectors. What about filter? Because the data showed that I replaced it 4 years ago, now we need to test the hypothesis, which is clock in fuel filter might be creating lower fuel pressure. Then how you test this hypothesis? It's simple. Replace the filter with a new one. As a methodology, I go to the mechanics and ask engineer to replace the filter, which is free, which is $70. As experiment, after replace the filter, empty the fuel tank up to less than quarter, and I go to the same uphill on I-99 and keep 65 to 70 miles per hour and drive. Result. I see the good result. No further engine sputtered. No power loss. RPM stayed as normal. Now I confirm that the hypothesis accepted by test. Finally, the problem is solved. Let's recap the process with the research question. The highest level research question was which are missing from the inside the cylinder combustion among fuel, air, and ignition. Clock in fuel filters is creating lower fuel pressure, and the answer is fuel. And here, discussion and conclusion is we find the symptom related to the simple fuel filter changes as proposed solution and as hypothesis. The engine sputter problems, there might be other sources. But to identify the fuel filter clocking problem, fill up the tank and check the fuel pressure. After the research process based on the research question, I've learned that I need to replace the fuel filter regularly. This is the research questions made to solve the problem so far. As you see this image on the right side, the making research question is the narrow down step to make hypothesis and test plan to solve the problem. This narrow down step is something all PhD students are familiar with conference. The lady we ask about, hey, what's your research question? Finally, this is the time to organize your paper writing in terms of research questions. Based on the symptom, problem, engine hesitation climbing uphill, we initiate a research process, then generate the first research question, which are missing from the inside the cylinder combustion, the process of converting gasoline into motion. As the next research process, we formulate the narrow down step question. What do we need for combustion? The combustion needs fuel, air, ignition, and ignition from electricity. This is the introduction part in your paper writing. People do not usually pay attention to introduce and literature review part and linking them to research questions. But you are now writing with respect to your research questions. You write from introduction, intro, literature review, model analysis, and so on. So you need to keep reminding yourself that what is the research question for this section and the next section, and what is the narrow down next research question to make a story. So you need to keep reminding yourself about that. Without the research questions, your writing look more like contents without frame or bones. Then based on the narrow down research question like literature review and model analysis, test result, and conclusion. I promise that you would much enjoy the writing because the writing is a ranking of the research questions and you have all you need through the research process. This is a detailed storyline built up for paper. This can be 2-minute speech as well. Image then you are talking to your grandmother or mom who does not have any technical background over your talk or writing. Then you can start. I have old car with the engine power loss, mom, and then it has a loss power problem. Then specific symptom is blah, 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 blah. Then this can be an introduction part. And then because I don't know what's going on, so mom, I check on the manual. Then find out that the car is operate with these things. And then based on this symptom and then checking on the leak or pipeline, I think I highly suspect that this might be a problem because I didn't change the filter for several years. So I go to the shop and replace the filter and do the same test. Then that is a model part. Then later you can say as a conclusion, this study find out that the fuel filter clog caused the engine power loss symptom after the test. Then mom, I find out that I need to pay attention to changing my fuel filter regularly. Again, this can be a 2-minute speech to your mom and grandmother. This is the structure of your writing. Fit your research cases and finding into your writing. This is the things to consider as a writer. Again, introduction part is the most important. Readers understand your work in terms of research cases and show the short version of your storyline. And write regularly, but not that much. Unfortunately, becoming a good writer takes a long time. Training your brain into generating a stream of well-organized reasoning thought takes a huge amount of time. In literature said 10,000 hours. Wow. Therefore, writing something all the time, anything is fine, diary, notes, email, and so on. But one of the best writing practice can be keeping an online blog. Blog posting are typically longer than other forms of online writing, and this is the environment that induces your brain to organize your thoughts. In addition, reading books is important for improving your writing skills as well. Creativity often starts from imitations. When you read a lot, you will be equipped with the raw materials for better writing. When you want to take a break, feel free to read. For academic writers, reading should be regarded as another form of writing practice. Next is writing some other stuff, writing in other forms. Some of my friends are actually very good at this. They use PowerPoint slides intensively, like writing down your thoughts, idea titles of nice articles on the PowerPoint slide, rather than using a word processor or other note-taking applications, such as Evernote or OneNote. The advantage of using slides can be twofold. First, laying out bullet points is usually easier than writing sentences or paragraphs. Second, you will save time creating your presentation slide later when you can use these PowerPoint-based notes as a draft. Since the flow of your thought is important with the oral presentation, writing thoughts directly down into a form of slide can be useful for your future presentation and easier than creating presentation slide after going over your paper. And next is separate writing and editing. One tip coming from so-called prolific writers is that you need to separate writing from editing when you want to write a lot. It sounds simple. Dump whatever thoughts you have right now. Almost no need to hitting on backspace key on your PC. Do not think any grammars. Forget about any restraints until you are done with dumping. Now get a good sleep, then do editing tomorrow. The main advantage of this separation technique is that you can save a number of raw materials that otherwise would have been discarded by your editing process, the process inside your brain. Simply storing the thoughts in the form of sentences helps stacking up the material for use. And there are several softwares that you can use for writing, include the LaTeX. Most important thing is write smart, not hard. Again, write smart, not hard. You do not want it, and I do not like it either, but put the highest priority on your writing work for your to-do list for a day. Only when your brain is fresh, you can write. When you start your work, get the writing done first and do other things later. Even a small bit of fatigue in your brain will greatly hamper your writing performance, and be sure get a sufficient amount of sleep. There are good guides and tutorials on writing, and this is the one and most popular ones that I got advantage and you would enjoy. So here is the information. Hope you enjoyed this talk, and if you have any further question, please feel free to contact me. Thank you. And for the interactive communication and for the next step of my speech, I ask you to complete the less than a minute survey, which is contains these 4 questions. Please finish this survey, and then hope to see you next time again. Thank you.